Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a massive shift. We're looking at how the global rules for artificial intelligence are moving away from, just theoretical ethics discussions into absolute operational urgency. For years, governing AI kind of felt like an academic exercise, right? Well, that era is officially over. Today, we're diving into the foundational architecture the world is scrambling to build to keep AI safe, trustworthy, and actually beneficial for all of us. So, let's just tackle this massive question head on. How do we actually govern machines that literally invent things? This is the exact puzzle that 47 adhering governments of the OECD had to confront with their 2024 policy updates. Because when the OECD first set their AI guidelines back in 2019, they were dealing with a completely different beast. But the rapid, almost overwhelming acceleration of generative models forced a major reckoning. I mean, how do you regulate a system that doesn't just sort data, but synthesizes entirely new, novel content from scratch? To figure that out, we've got a clear roadmap today. We'll start with the AI Governance Challenge, look at upgrading the AI rules, explore the 5 pillars of trust, follow the money, discuss jobs and global laws, and finally look at surviving agentic AI. All right, Section 1, the AI Governance Challenge. We really have to start by defining what exactly we're trying to regulate here, because the success of any framework totally depends on nailing down a precise yet flexible definition. What's absolutely crucial here is the strategic pivot to 2 specific words, infers and generate. This specifically targets the highly unpredictable nature of modern generative AI. This updated 2024 definition was designed to capture the wild capabilities of large language models and diffusion models. It's an acknowledgement that we aren't just dealing with automated decision-making anymore. We are dealing with multi-stage systems that generate brand new outputs capable of altering both our digital and physical worlds. Moving right along to Section 2, upgrading the AI rules. To really grasp the urgency here, look at how much these rules had to grow up in just 5 years. The 2019 framework relied heavily on this idea of human determination, basically assuming a human was always pulling the levers. But the 2024 framework? It shifts to human agency and oversight, admitting that humans might now just be supervising rather than directing every single step. We're targeting large language models, deepfakes, misinformation. Plus, they explicitly included environmental sustainability, which directs some very urgent policy attention toward the absolutely massive energy consumption of AI data centers. We aren't just fixing software bugs anymore, we're trying to mitigate political manipulation and climate impacts. And the ripple effect of this is huge. Think about a staggering jump from 8% to 32% in global regulatory requirements related to organizational accountability. That is a global quadruple. It sends a very clear signal. Managing AI risk is no longer just a technical testing phase for the engineers in the back room. It is now a strict compliance issue and a heavy organizational responsibility for the executives actually running these companies. Which brings us to Section 3, 5 pillars of trust. So how do we actively build trustworthiness across the entire lifespan of a model? Well, the core of the OECD recommendation is built on 5 values-based principles: inclusive growth and sustainability, respect for human rights and rule of law, transparency and explainability, robustness, security and safety, and organizational accountability. These holistic pillars are our operational rules. They're designed to be a package deal. You can't just champion robustness while completely ignoring human rights. They mandate everything from stopping AI from amplifying disinformation to demanding fail-safes so that if a system risks causing harm, we can safely override it. But, and this is a big but, there are no easy answers here. Take the transparency pillar, for example. If an AI denies you a bank loan, you have a recognized right to a plain, easy-to-understand explanation of why. But here's the massive friction point. Objective transparency is incredibly difficult when these black box algorithms are fiercely protected as corporate intellectual property. How on earth can governments audit these systems for biases if companies hide behind trade secrecy laws and refuse to disclose their training data? It's a huge tug-of-war. Let's move to Section 4, follow the money. Because, let's be real, rules mean absolutely nothing without the funding to back them up. And we have a structural problem here. Look at the data from 2021. You've got a $340 billion private investment juggernaut, completely overshadowing a U.S. non-defense public AI budget of roughly $1.5 billion. It's a David and Goliath situation, except Goliath has all the cash. When the private sector has near absolute research dominance, public interest alternatives like AI specifically designed for rural education or specialized healthcare become incredibly scarce. Plus, governments just can't compete with Silicon Valley salaries, which causes a massive brain drain of top AI talent straight out of the public sector. And this financial reality plays out differently across the globe. The US is leading the pack with over $470 billion in cumulative private investment, but they are quite literally hitting a physical wall with electricity infrastructure limits. Meanwhile, the European Union, sitting at around $50 billion, has to navigate heavily fragmented markets and high compliance costs. Then you have the UK at roughly $28 billion, struggling to scale their compute power and attract that crucial late-stage venture capital. Section 5. Jobs and Global Laws. We absolutely have to connect these high-level investments to the everyday reality for citizens, particularly when it comes to the workforce. The data shows us that AI is actually far more likely to aggressively reshape your job than to completely substitute it. Projections show about 50 to 55% of jobs, think consultants, lawyers, accountants, are going to be fundamentally reshaped. That means upskilling is an immediate necessity. However, we can't ignore the 10 to 15% of jobs facing direct substitution. It might sound like a small slice, but globally, that translates to an estimated 300 million jobs exposed to automation. We're going to need some serious social safety nets. Protecting those workers globally requires cooperation, but we are seeing some intense friction there too. On one hand, international cooperation creates collective red lines, agreements on what is just unacceptable, like autonomous weaponry, and helps share benefits with developing nations. But the grim reality is a lot of states view AI as a zero-sum game for military power, and there's this very real danger of technological imperialism. We cannot have a situation where the global south is entirely excluded from standard setting and forced to adopt AI rules designed exclusively for the realities of Brussels or Silicon Valley. And because of that friction, the global legal landscape is a bit of a fragmented mess right now. The EU AI Act is binding, risk-based hard law. But across the Atlantic, and the US is leaning on sector-specific, largely voluntary frameworks. The UK is taking a much more laissez-faire, pro-innovation approach to keep barriers low, while Japan is focused on building consensus through the Hiroshima AI process. This total lack of interoperability creates massive compliance headaches. It also opens the door to regulatory arbitrage, where companies might just pack up and move their operations to whichever jurisdiction is the most lenient. Finally, Section 6. Surviving Agentic AI. Because as we look forward, the exponential curve of this technology threatens to outpace every single framework we just talked about. Civil society critics are raising a massive red flag here. They argue that stretching a historical product safety model, literally the kind of framework used to make sure physical toys or toasters don't catch fire, to measure something as complex as human rights compliance is incredibly dangerous. Without built-in costs for non-compliance, we risk widespread ethics washing. That's where for-profit companies parade these nice principles in public, but continue high-risk, reckless practices behind closed doors. I want to leave you with this final thought. We are rapidly accelerating toward agentic AI, systems that don't just predict the next word in a sentence, but actually take complex actions and coordinate with other systems entirely on their own. The risks are inherently cross-border now. Some experts are even suggesting that the most advanced, high-risk systems might eventually need to be developed inside international joint AI labs just to guarantee global safety. So, the question is, as AI grows up into fully autonomous systems, are we actually ready to cooperate on that level, or will geopolitical rivalry get in the way of our own survival? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the frameworks that are quietly shaping our future.